Thank y'all very much. Thank y'all. Thank y'all very much. Thank you. Thank you for that very warm reception, Pete. Thank you for that generous introduction. I want to thank the great folks at the NRA and the IFC as well for their tremendous work. I also want to thank you for bringing some of this Louisiana weather so I'd feel just at home for this rain and humidity. At least we're putting an end to the drought, though. That's a good thing. I know we're here to talk about American values. You know, I want to talk about first, I want to start where my American values came from. Like many, I learned from my parents. You know, Mark Twain said something pretty important and pretty smart. I'll paraphrase him. He said, it's amazing how much smarter your parents become the older you get. You know what I'm talking about? You know, when you're a young man, you really don't think your parents know anything. And I said all kinds of foolish things to my dad when I was a little boy, and he kept telling me, you just wait. And now that I've got 3 young kids of my own, 10-year-old girl, 8-year-old boy, 6-year-old boy, I can't tell you how many times I hear my father coming out of my mouth. It's like the bumper sticker says, you know, grandchildren are God's revenge for all the bad things we did to our parents. But there were 3 things my dad used to say to me when I was growing up that drove me absolutely crazy, that I never understood as a child, that make a lot of sense to me now, almost every day. First, he would tell me this. He'd say, now, son, you better eat your vegetables whether you want to or not, because he said there are children starving in China. Never understood what that meant. I always thought, well, if they're starving, let's mail them my vegetables. They'll be happy, I'll be happy, everyone will be happy. The second thing he'd tell me, doesn't matter what grade I'd bring home from school, it was never good enough. And if you would try to complain and say, well, my friends didn't do that well, he'd always say the same thing. He'd say, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? I had no idea what that meant and what that had to do with my grades. But the third thing he'd say to my brother and me every day, he'd say, sons, you should give thanks every day that you were born in the greatest country in the history of the world. You should give thanks that you are privileged enough to be Americans in this world today. You know, I understand what he means now, but as a child, I didn't really understand the importance of what he was trying to tell me. Of course I was an American. What else would I be? Everybody I knew was an American. It wasn't something that you really think about as a young child. But you see, my parents, they lived the American dream. Literally, my parents came to Louisiana over 40 years ago so that my mom could study at LSU. My dad, he's one of those typical dads. We've all have them in our family, one of 9 kids. First and only one that got past the 5th grade. Grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. I know because I've heard these stories every single day of my life. Let me tell you, you ask that man for an allowance for all the chores you did, he'd want to charge you for the food you were eating and the fact that he put a roof on top of your head. Every time you'd complain about something, he would tell you how he had to walk uphill to school both ways. But there's a funny thing that happens. You know, there's a gene that gets turned off when you become a grandparent. The strictest parents become the most lenient grandparents in the world. I was trying to put my youngest in timeout at his house. He comes and unlocks the door to let my boy out. He said, son, that's cruel. You can't leave your son in there by himself. I said, are you kidding me? There was no timeout when I was growing up. I said, you used to spank us. How's this cruel compared to that? My dad, a grown man, looked at me and says, son, I don't know what you're talking about. We never spanked you. I'm telling you, he has forgotten my entire childhood. It's amazing. You know what's amazing to me? When my mom was going to LSU, my dad, he literally didn't have a job. He didn't want a handout. Took the yellow pages and started calling company after company until he could get a job. Because my dad would always tell us this about America. He'd say, you know what's amazing about this country? He said, if you're willing to work hard and get a great education, there's no limit to what you can accomplish in this great country. See, the circumstances of your birth don't determine your future as an adult. You don't have to be born to the right family, in the right zip code, in the right geography, the right race, and the right gender. None of that determines how well you're going to do in this great country. And Peter's right. That does sound a little different from the attitude we're hearing from the White House today. I think my dad, if he were here right now, would tell us, yeah, Pete and his family, they did build that. But what makes our country so great is that every child can pursue their dreams. Every generation can do better than their parents have done. That's the American dream. The dream that each of us has the opportunity to excel if we're willing to work hard, take risks, and achieve our goals. At the core of our nation's soul, it's not words on a piece of parchment. It's not our political institutions. It's not even our abundant natural resources. It's really our people that make America great. Our people are the bedrock of our republic. We rely upon each other in our representative democracy to protect the liberties of our friends, our family members, our neighbors, so that our own freedoms may be preserved. That belief in freedom and the security that freedom ensures is the core of my political philosophy. And that's why I push so hard, and that's why I'm so honored to be here today to talk to you about the importance of the Second Amendment, our Second Amendment rights. You heard Pete tell the story that after Hurricane Katrina, you literally had government officials going door to door, confiscating firearms from law-abiding citizens, leaving them defenseless. And if you haven't seen the NRA videos, I encourage you to go online and hear these stories firsthand from the people who suffered through this. I remember as it happened, I never thought it was going to happen in America. And certainly I never thought it would happen in my home state of Louisiana, never thought it would happen in New Orleans. And yet it did. As a result of that, we brought Republicans and Democrats together to pass a law in Congress to make it illegal for gun-grabbing officials to use a natural disaster to confiscate the people's firearms. Now, I did admit to Pete something pretty humbling after Katrina. My wife, beautiful woman, great mother, said to me after Katrina, after seeing what happened with the confiscation of firearms, she said, I never want to be in that situation again. You know, we've always had guns in our house. I'm a hunter. She knows the basics about guns, but never really had gone out and used them herself. And so after Katrina, she said, I want to learn. I want to go to the range. I want to make sure that if God forbid we're ever in a situation like that again, I can defend my children, I can defend my home. I want to admit to my friends here something pretty humbling. I don't tell this to everybody, but the troopers went with her to the range. She came back. I said, Governor, I think she's a better shot than you are. She didn't have any of those bad habits. You know how we guys are. We think we know everything. We don't want anybody to teach us anything. She didn't have any of those bad habits to unlearn. But it wasn't just in Congress. Early in my first term as governor, we had another opportunity when our legislature debated the rights of law-abiding gun owners to have their weapons in their cars or their trucks at their workplaces. That argument pitted two of my natural allies against each other, but it wasn't a hard decision for me. I told all of our friends that I would take the side of freedom every time, and in Louisiana, freedom won. We passed that law, signed it into law in my first term as governor. Now this year in our state, we're doing something even more fundamental. We are adopting the strongest, most ironclad constitutional protection for law-abiding gun owners. We really call it, it's really our own Second Amendment, if you will. It's a new constitutional provision to repair the damage done by misguided judges. We wouldn't need this if they would just read the black letter law that's in the Constitution, but we're going to pass this in Louisiana. I'm going to read you this new Louisiana constitutional amendment. It's not a very long amendment, it's 2 sentences. The right of each citizen to keep and bear arms is fundamental and shall not be infringed. Any restriction on this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny. That's it. I think that pretty much covers just about everything, don't you? I mean, I think even a liberal judge is going to have a hard time finding a loophole in there. People try to make it more complicated. People wanted to add language. I said, no, let's keep it simple. So even a liberal judge could understand it. I want to make sure that even they couldn't mess that up. But yeah, that's right. Well, we'll have to explain to them. That's right. In Louisiana, we are serious about the right to keep and bear arms. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., our president's just as serious about eviscerating this right. You know, it's amazing to me. It seems to me that there is a full-time job in the White House for somebody to follow this president around saying, he really didn't mean to say that. Have you noticed that? I mean, whenever he gets off that teleprompter, whenever he starts just speaking honestly, we actually get a peek at what he really believes. That's what in Virginia it was, if you've got a business, you didn't build that. And a few weeks before that, it was private sector is doing fine. It's public sector we've got to worry about. In 2011, 3 different times. He said the American people have gotten soft, lazy, and lost our ambition. And every single time, somebody has to go out there from the White House and say, no, the president didn't really mean that. Well, I got a message for the president. If he really thinks the American people are soft, lazy, and lost our ambition, number one, he's wrong about us. And number two, it is time for him to start looking for a new job because he's not going to be president of the United States. 4 years ago in San Francisco, you may remember, he characterized folks just like you and me. And let's be honest, he had us in, I think this was the picture he had. Look around, these are the people he had in mind. It's us. He was talking to his donors out in California. He said, he pictured us as unsophisticated ingrates who are, and I quote, bitterly clinging to our guns and religion. Now, I think that was meant to be an insult. But as the governor of the great state of Louisiana, I am proud to stand here and tell you, in Louisiana, we are proudly clinging to our guns and religion. We've got plenty of both in the Bayou State. And we make no apologies for it. Maybe we're just not smart enough to realize that was supposed to be an insult, but we take it as a compliment. But you know, it's not just his philosophy on guns, it's also his actions. What makes this president so dangerous, not just the rhetoric, it's what he's actually done. President Obama has appointed 2 judges to the Supreme Court who are dead wrong on the Second Amendment. He appointed an attorney general who allowed guns to be smuggled into Mexico to help bolster his case for gun control back here at home. Now, you know that as Operation Fast and Furious. I think the next operation should have been called Operation Fire Eric Holder. You know, I was one of the first and very few governors in America to call for his resignation. Some people told me I shouldn't do that. They said, Bobby, you know, you're just going to irritate the president. You're not going to accomplish anything. Besides, that's above your pay grade. Well, let me tell you something. Defending our fundamental freedoms is not above anybody's pay grade in America. It is the duty of every one of us, and I will do it every single time. This president's assault on our Second Amendment freedom is one of the primary reasons we must make him a one-term president this November. But it's not the only reason. If you look at this president's policies across every issue, from health care to energy to his budgets to whatever you name, one thing is crystal clear. He doesn't believe in the transformative and dynamic power of freedom. He doesn't believe we can trust Americans to make smart energy choices. That's why he funds shams like Solyndra, but he blocks the Keystone Pipeline. He doesn't believe we can trust Americans to make smart healthcare choices. That's why he wants to put the government in charge. He doesn't believe we can trust Americans with our own money. That's why he wants to raise our taxes. He doesn't believe we can trust Americans with firearms. That's why he gave to Sotomayor and Kagan and Holder and dozens of liberal appellate judges we haven't even heard about yet. I heard someone say the other day that President Obama's mistake in his first term were because of his inexperience. They said it was because he wasn't ready. I mean, when you think about it, to be fair to the man, he hasn't run anything, not even a lemonade stand before we made him president of the United States. Never ran a company, never ran a state, never ran a company. But I give him more credit than that. I don't think it's just incompetence. I don't think it's because he wasn't ready, it's because he wasn't right. You know, there's a fundamental disagreement in this country today. There's a fundamental disagreement in our country today, and this election is going to go a long way towards settling it. What America is all about, the promise of America, is that your last name, zip code, race, gender, doesn't determine your outcome in this great country. On the other side, you've got that Occupy Wall Street mentality. On our side, we understand your own choices, your own decisions determine your outcomes in America. The other side demonizes success and goes after those that own small businesses. The reason we're here today is we're here to defend freedom. You know, before I close with one final thought, you've heard from a lot of speakers today. This is a very important election. And obviously I'm supporting Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan. And by the way, about Congressman Ryan, great friend of mine. We served in Congress together. I think Governor Romney made a bold pick when he selected Congressman Ryan, but with all due apologies to Governor Romney, I think President Obama made a bolder decision to keep Joe Biden on his ticket. I think that's But before I close on that one final thought, you've also heard from a number of folks running for Congress, running for the state Senate, running for the state House right here in Iowa. We've got some great men and women willing to defend our freedoms. It is so important we keep the House. It is so important we take the state Senate. So important we help to make sure we keep the House up in Washington, D.C. It's important we give Governor Branstad the support he needs to get good conservative reforms here in Iowa. So I want to echo those that have come before me to ask for your support for the candidates you've heard from here today. But I want to close leaving with you with just one final thought. Our greatest asset, the source of America's place in history, the provider of our future, is our people. Every great American value, from limited government to religious freedom to free enterprise to personal responsibility to the right to bear arms, is dependent on a people willing to fight for them. We must educate our young people today, not only so that they may read and write, but so that they understand our history and the principles upon which our country was founded. I believe that America should remain the greatest country in the world, and I don't make any apologies for saying that. But America should never be content to settle. We should never be ashamed to be the greatest country in the world. We have a moral responsibility to make our country stronger and unashamedly export our ideals of freedom, democracy, and self-determination to all who would fulfill the divinely inspired potential of every living soul on this planet. I'm ready to stand and fight for that freedom. I know you're willing to fight for that freedom. I'm asking you to stay in that fight, stay vigilant. Let's win the hearts and minds of our country this year. Let's not rest until we have won. Thank you for having me here. May God bless you. May God bless the great state of Iowa. May God bless these United States of America. Thank you all very much.